Z tego miejsca chciałabym pozdrowić dwa lisy, Jacka oraz Anię. Dziękuję bardzo za Wasze wsparcie.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Zuza and this is Książkowisko, a Polish channel where we talk about science fiction and fantasy. And today is an amazing day because one of my favorite authors of all time has joined me in the studio. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Hearn, author of The Iron Druid Chronicles and also many other amazing books. Hello Kevin, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Zuza. Hello, everybody in Poland. You're just some of my favorite people, obviously, because I keep putting you in my books.
Yes, I think that this is why for many Polish people, Iron Druid Chronicles have, a special place in their hearts, because Poland is not a place which appears very often in, American fantasy. So for us, it's something special. So yeah. But before we talk more about your books, how is Canada today?
It's a little bit rainy where I am, but it's lovely. The birds are coming back from the south, and everything is started. The trees are beginning to bud or bloom, and it's beautiful here.
You moved to Canada a few years ago, right? Because you're originally from the US. So
Yeah.
what's the biggest difference between the US and Canada?
I don't know if this is going to be something that folks can relate to, but in the United States, there's this constant low-level terror of being shot. And I don't have that in Canada. I can go wherever I like and be pretty much assured that some random person will not shoot me just for living my life. So that fear is gone, and so is fear of going medically bankrupt, because of course Canada has a healthcare system, whereas the United States has a big mess. So I appreciate those things very much about Canada, and I'm very much more relaxed here than I was in the United States.
Sounds great. Yeah, for Europeans, national healthcare system is kind of a standard. We in Poland have it too. But I can understand that living without it could be kind of horrifying sometimes. So yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. But before we dive into the questions from the audience, and there is a lot, I just wanted to know more about Kevin. So did you always want to be a writer?
Not always. I didn't get into writing until I was in college. So, and then I wasn't published until I was 39 years old. So it took quite a while for me to get published, but that's okay. I figure that in a lot of ways, you have to live your life for a while before you experience enough things to appreciate the human condition and write well about it. So in terms of when I started writing, it was at age 19 when I was still in college. I started writing stories then, and then 20 years of writing before I actually got published. But there was a lot of practice in between there. Before
Okay.
that, I was into. I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
No. Go.
Oh,
So what kind of jobs did you do before?
Yeah, I was interested in being an art major. So and I wound up teaching English. So I was a high school English teacher for 17 years before I wound up writing full time. And but the art wound up being a part of my life anyway, because I draw maps for my books.
Oh, so the maps are done by you. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, the maps in the Tales of Pell, which I don't think, they're only available in English. They're not translated into Polish. But then also the Seven Kennings maps are done by me. So yeah. Some of that.
Okay. What about, have you ever thought then about creating some internal illustrations for Iron Druid or any other of your books?
I haven't done it for the illustrations for the books. However, I have done some things behind the scenes. Like I had to illustrate for artists how the tattoos on Atticus's body looked, and where they were, how they were laid out and all that. And so I did little illustrations like that were then executed by artists who are much better than me. So yeah, I've done a little bit of that.
And with your teaching career, do you think that it influenced somehow your writing career? Is there something that you took from your teaching career and you applied it to being a professional writer?
Oh, absolutely. In the Iron Druid Chronicles, there are these Shakespearean quote duels between Atticus and Leif Helgerson, and those Shakespearean quote things. I was teaching Shakespeare. There's a lot of comments in book 2 about high schools and how they are run, and that's also directly from my teaching career. I have jokes in there about modernist poetry, and then of course the mythology. Some of the mythology is was covered as part of my teaching career as well. So the Norse and the Greco-Romans were a big part of that. So yeah, a lot of what I was teaching found its way into the book somehow.
Okay. So you started learning about mythologies, different mythologies, because in your books there's a lot of them and they're all mixed up. I mean, not mixed up, but they're all mixed together, right?
Yeah.
So you started when you were studying, you started learning this as a university student.
Yes, yes, indeed. I was into all kinds of world religions. I studied that as well, and so the religions and the mythologies all sort of wound up blending together. There was also Native American religions course that I took that basically formed the foundation of what I was doing with Coyote down the road. Although a lot more of that had to do with actually speaking to folks from the Navajo Nation about what Coyote meant to them.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay. And I always ask this because I think it's always fascinating. What's your publishing story? What's the story of you getting published?
Well,
Is it one of those painful and long tales, or
Well, I mean, I had a day job, so it was fine. I wasn't, desperate to get published or anything, but it was a dream of mine to be published someday. And I wrote 2 full novels before I wrote Hounded, and those didn't go anywhere. Hounded was the 3rd book that I wrote, but it was the first that got published. And what I basically did was I got an agent, sort of very much by luck as much as skill, I guess. But I got an agent, and then the agent sent it out to 6 different publishers, I believe, and 4 of them bid on it. So yeah, I actually was able to sell the first 3 books at auction, and things went from there. The series was unexpectedly successful, and I was able to write more. So I'm very grateful to everybody who not only read the book but told their friends about it. It's really kind of you.
So did you expect when you wrote the first book that it's going to be an internationally selling series and people from Poland, somewhere in the middle of nowhere, contacting you for interviews?
No, I never expected any of that. I didn't, of course, when I wrote the first book, I had no idea it was actually going to be translated in Polish. I had Polish characters. That was because of a friend of mine who was an immigrant from Warsaw. She introduced me to several parts of Polish culture, and she also introduced me to Żubrówka, and add apple juice, and you're ready to go. And that's kind of where that whole thing came from. Basically, I was my friend was helping me out with that. And she gave me the Polish phrases to use in Hext, which in translation, I'm sure it doesn't come across as being in a foreign language, of course, to you. But in English, the original books, there are Polish passages. So I put them on my website with an audio file so that English speakers could hear what the Polish actually sounds like from a native speaker. Because if English speakers, when they read Polish, they're not even pronouncing it even close to accurately. So that's why I put it on my website.
However, I have to say, it's very interesting what you said about us not recognizing that it was done well. And I actually have to disagree because authors very often put some small bits and pieces of Polish culture in their books, but they are very often incorrect. Like, for example, names or surnames are incorrect, or some words or phrases are used in the improper context. So it's very, like, now I understand that you had this friend who helped you and proved everything. So that makes sense because everything was done correctly and very smoothly, and it made sense. Also, in the Polish translation, especially names and surnames. Like these were real names and surnames that we use in our country nowadays. And it felt when you were describing parts of your book, books which were happening in Poland, it really felt like they are happening in Poland. So,
Good. I'm
yeah.
glad. I did get to visit. I was there. I was brought over for PeerCon. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I was in Poznan and Warsaw, and I loved my visit there. I still have a mug from Browaria, a particular pub in Poznan in the main square there. I'm writing a short story now that's also set in Warsaw that will be coming out next year. So I've been doing some research, and I've reached out to some folks about some buildings in Warsaw that I wanted to reference, and I'm fascinated with Polish tea rooms. It's a thing that doesn't really exist in Canada or the United States the way it does in Poland. So I wish I could go back. I would love to come back for another visit. I loved it there.
Yeah, we have a lot of tea rooms and even more bakeries.
Yeah.
I don't know if you visited any bakeries when you were in Poland, but like, for example, there is like 8 of them in my area where I live, more than food shops, and stuff. So, yeah.
I love that. I mean, one of the other things I really liked about Poland was a lot of small businesses, and rather than large chains or franchises or things like that you see quite often in North America. I love that small businesses were much more of a thing in Poland, and every place had its own personality. I loved it.
I really like what you said about researching Warsaw and all of the, like, for example, asking people about things connected with Warsaw, because I think that this is going beyond what even many Polish writers do when they don't come from Warsaw, but they write, they live in a different city and they put their story in Warsaw, and very often the buildings don't exist, or the streets are all mixed up, or it's just like, the city doesn't have any personality. So it makes me happy that you say that.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
Warsaw has such a great history and a complicated history, right? Because of course it was occupied by the Nazis and then by the Russians, and it has a lot of history going on there in even from district to district. So I find it fascinating, and I admire the resilience of the Polish people during those occupations. And yeah, so the story I'm writing actually harkens back to a time during the Warsaw Rebellion during World War II, and a certain building that was part of the fighting. So yeah, the Coven is going to be active there, and it'll be out in an anthology called Paranormal Payback that's being edited by Jim Butcher.
Oh, okay. So it will be available for purchase in paperback or hardback.
Yeah, next year.
Next year.
I doubt that it will be translated into Polish right away, or if at all, because it's a collection of short stories, and sometimes those don't get translated. But it will be available in English next year.
Well, for example, a lot of my viewers read in English, so it's not really that big of a problem with my generation. I would say that English is less and less of a problem. More and more people read, and we have now access to, it's very easy to buy books from England or from the US. So yeah. So I'm sure that if people know about it, they will want to read it. All right, but going back to this moment when you got your book deal, was this the moment that you knew that you're going to be a full-time writer, or did you continue your teaching career for a while?
Yeah, I continued my teaching career. I wrote the first 5 books of the Iron Druid Chronicles while I was still teaching full time. And the first book that I wrote as a full-time writer was Hunted, the 6th book. So yeah, there's you have to have several books finished to where you are earning royalties on your older books plus getting advances from your newer books to be able to pay the bills. So it takes a while. You can't just, I mean, I know it's possible, but very few writers are able to just write one book and then go full time. You have to sell quite a few books to be able to do that. So for me, it was the ability to sell quite a few during, as a series that allowed me to go full time.
Because I read, I think on your website that you sold it first as a trilogy, but then it was so successful that the publishing house just expanded the contract, right?
Yeah, they let me write more, basically, which is the way, unfortunately, things work. The publishing house doesn't make its decisions based on whether they like the story or not. They make their decisions based on whether it sells copies. So, again, I'm great. Yeah, I'm grateful to everybody who, continues to discover the series and tell their friends about it. So it just lets me write more.
Okay, so since we started talking about the books, I think we could jump into the questions from the audience.
Sure.
Because when I asked my audience, would they like to ask you anything? There were so many things that I just had to narrow it down. And I divided this into categories, and I hope we can try to get through as many of them as possible.
Okay.
First one is, did you have to do a lot of research before writing the Iron Drake Chronicles?
A little bit, and then I did a lot as I went. The primary attraction for me was being able to bring the Irish pagan pantheon to the forefront, because nobody at the time had really been writing about the Irish pagans except maybe a little bit about the Morrigan and sometimes a little bit about Breed. Every so often you get the Wild Hunt or Cernunnos, but like Angus Og and Flittish and some of these others, they were never mentioned anywhere else. And I thought they were kind of fascinating characters. So I wanted to explore that more. And I was into, that particular research quite a bit. And some of the Irish pagan mythology is really fascinating. So yeah, I did a little bit of that, but then the stuff for the other books came along much later as I was progressing. So yeah, and I also found the sword Fragara, that Atticus has. I found that in my research, where there's very clear evidence of the Tuatha Dé Danann giving it to Conn of the 100 Battles, and then there's no evidence that it was ever given back. And so that's where I was able to basically say, well, my druid stole it, So I was able to find, parts of mythology where there were holes in it that I could fill in with my character, basically. And that was a lot of fun for me.
And Irish mythology, I think, is in general a difficult thing to write about because there's not so many sources on it, right?
Yeah, I mean, the sources that we have were actually written down by Christians who did not, agree with any of the pagans, right? So, you basically had people who were sort of their enemies writing about them. And so you have to wonder how much of it is true and how much of it is malicious. And so that had to be kept in mind. But what I tried to do is look for elements about druids that were attested to by multiple sources. So there were multiple different sources that said druids had the ability to shapeshift and control weather and, to maybe even teleport. So that's where all of those things basically came from, was multiple attestations by different sources. And then it was Julius Caesar who said that druids had a 12-year training period. Now, he lied about druids a lot because he hated them and wanted, to conquer them. But I could not figure any reason why he would lie about that. That seemed to be one little fact that was just an actual fact. So I went with that, So.
Yeah, and it found its way into your books.
Exactly.
And actually, a question that was asked a lot was why a druid? Because, before, I think that before your books, there were, of course, other urban fantasy books, but they always either focused on vampires, werewolves, mages, sorcerers, and stuff like that. So why a druid?
Okay, so that's a great question because it's actually something that I was concerned about. I wanted to write an urban fantasy because I was enjoying the genre. And what I realized about the genre was that you can write about anything in the modern world. You basically have an unlimited scope. So why limit yourself to the same few creatures and same mythologies when you could literally go anywhere? So um, I realized that vampires and werewolves were so big, you had to include them, so they are there. I have vampires and werewolves in my books, so that it is recognizably urban fantasy, and therefore a publisher knows how to market it, right? But I wanted to do a druid to set myself apart from all of the other writers who were churning out vampire and werewolf stories and love triangles. That was a big part of it too at the time. Like there was a lot of romance aspects to it. And so I wanted to have a druid because it would allow me to explore Irish pagan mythology, which not a lot of other people were doing. And again, it would set me apart. Nobody was writing druids in urban fantasy. Everybody was writing druids in epic fantasy. So I was able to distinguish myself from all of the other writers by picking a druid. And since I'm part Irish, that worked out for me as well. I just felt comfortable
Okay.
there. Yeah. I'm sort of a UK mutt. I'm Irish, Scottish, Welsh, and British. All of those things. So yeah, that's basically where it came from. I just saw an opportunity to distinguish myself from everybody else, while at the same time remaining true to the urban fantasy general template. Yeah.
So was the druid first, or was Irish mythology first?
Oh, that's it. The dog was first. Here's the thing. I just love dogs.
Of
And
course.
so I wanted a talking dog. And this is answering your question. Why a druid? Well, if you're going to have a human who can talk to an animal, there are very few kinds of characters that you can use. And one is a wizard or a witch, but the problem with using that for me was that there's a master servant vibe or relationship there. Like the animal is a familiar, and sort of bound to the service. And I wanted the dog and my character to be friends. So a druid seemed to fit that bill much more. So that's why I chose a druid, is so that he would be friends with the dog. And then once I wanted a druid, then I'm like, well, wait a minute, why would a druid be living in modern day Arizona? And that's what got me into all of the mythology and stuff, and figuring out, okay, there's a sword that got stolen and never returned, and he's hiding out from Irish gods who want to kill him. There we go. And so it kind of snowballed from there. Is basically, figuring out why this character would be in hiding, and who he was, and why does he have this relationship with the dog? Well, he's so old that the dog keeps him grounded in the present day. So yeah, there you go. Hope that helped.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. That dogs tend to do that. That's true. Yeah. I myself have a very big dog also. Not as big as the Irish Wolfhound, but pretty big, bigger than the other ones.
Yeah.
So yeah. But it's really funny that you say that the dog was first, because I swear about 50% of the questions that viewers ask were about the dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were not about anything else but the dog.
Yeah, that's kind of the funny, ironic thing as from a writer's perspective. The dog is the character on which I spend the least amount of time thinking, because he's, strictly speaking, he's a flat character. He comes into the story liking sausage and poodles, and he exits liking sausage and poodles. Like, he doesn't really grow except in his vocabulary throughout the series. So it's funny that he is the most popular character when he was always intended to be just, sort of the side character as a companion for the druid. And the druid has the big character arc and the great changes to deal with. So.
Yes, one of the comments here was, I don't have any questions. I just wanted to say I love Oberon.
I love him too. Thank you so much.
But another question is a bit more, dogs or cats?
For me personally, I like dogs. I have had cats here too, but I love dogs, man. And we're currently dog sitting for our neighbor, just the sweetest black lab. And in fact, my wife is out walking the dog at the moment. So yeah, they're great.
And have you ever had an Irish Wolfhound? If so, what do you think about these dogs and who would you recommend them to? I told you there is a lot of questions about dogs.
That's fine. I personally have never had an Irish Wolfhound. I've never lived in a place where I feel that I could give them a good home, because you need to be able to walk them a lot and give them a lot of space. And because they're big and they're running dogs, they want to stretch their legs and get going. So I've never really been able to give them what they need, so I've never gotten that particular breed. I've had a Boston Terrier and a pug. So
okay.
Yeah, the Boston Terrier, Starbuck, basically is based off of the Boston Terrier I had. But the internal dialogue of Oberon is based on my two dogs, the pug and the Boston Terrier, because they have such expressive faces and you could almost see what they're thinking. So that's kind of where that all came from. As far as who would I recommend them to? I mean, you basically don't want to be living in an apartment. you want to have a lot of space for the Irish Wolfhound to run around in. So yeah, it's not for everybody, but there are lots of happy Irish Wolfhounds out there.
Okay, so changing the topic a little bit, how much creative control do you have over your books when it comes to cover design and audiobook narration? And did you have a say in choosing Atticus model for the covers? So this guy, for everybody, this guy here, Polish covers are the same as the first US covers, because now there is a new editions of US covers, right? We're going to talk about that in a second. And by the way, I have to say that this is book 7, for everyone who doesn't know. And this is the most expensive book that I have in my whole collection. And I do have some very nice special editions of book. This book costed me an ungodly amount of money because there is your autograph here. This is a book that Rebis, your publisher in Poland, put for sale on a charity auction last year. And it's a very big charity auction like we organize every year in Poland. And when I saw it, I was like, I'm getting it. Nobody else is getting it. And there was a lot of people betting on it. And at the last minute, because there was a lot of people betting on it, I got so stressed that I put an insane amount of money to outbid everybody else. And I won, which is fine. Like, it goes to a very, very good charity cause. That's fine. But, so now this is the most expensive book by far that I own in my whole collection. And I was justifying it by saying that, but I love this author. I will never be able to meet him. I will never be able to talk to him. So I guess the joke is on me right now, since we're here.
Well, that's what's so wonderful. In case you or anybody else is interested, I believe I have some signed Polish editions available at World Builders Market, and they whatever they have there, it's not for auction. They're just like, until we're out, we'll sell them for whatever price they have. So if you want to check it out, it's worldbuildersmarket.com, and you can look for the Kevin Hearn collection and see if there's any Polish signed editions left. I know they used to have them. I'm not sure if they're there anymore, but they might be. So check it out.
Okay, I'm going to put the link in the description of this video. So everyone who's interested, you can go and check it out. So do you have any creative control over covers, design, and other things?
Yes. I was consulted for all of the covers. And once they figured out that, we need these tattoos and we need this sort of look to them, they found a model who would work. Then they actually had that necklace made custom for the photo shoots. And then they found a sword as well that would work. So
this necklace.
Yes. Yeah. So that was all actually made by the photographer. He commissioned a jeweler to make that. And now afterward, I had a jeweler make a design that anybody can buy now. But yeah, that was fantastic. Once they had that model set up, they just kept taking different photo shoots for each book with that same model and asked me which one I liked, and I picked one, and there we go. As far as audiobook narration, at the time, audiobooks were not as big a deal as they are now. Audiobooks were a very sort of new industry, and my experience with them had been very boring audiobooks that English teachers would maybe play in their classes to, and that was it. And I didn't think when I signed the contract that I would ever, earn out the money that they were paying me for it. And I was wrong because
wrong.
Yeah, I sell more audiobooks than I do print and ebook now. Because the audiobook narrator is so good, at least in English. I have no idea what it's like in Poland. I'm not even sure about the audio in Poland.
There is a lot. There is a lot. And in fact, actually, I have a question about that. Because even one person commented that, and it's true, that Polish audiobooks for Iron Druid Chronicles are fantastic. They're
Good.
fantastic. They're 10 out of 10.
Okay,
So yeah, audiobooks are now very big in Poland too. So actually, someone also wanted to ask, is it right now a big part of your sales?
It is, yeah. Like I was just saying, I actually sell more audiobooks than I do print or ebook combined. So it's gigantic. And I'm a little bit of an outlier. That's not typical. I've just been blessed with such great audiobook narrators that, and I guess the stories lend themselves very well to that sort of storytelling. So it's worked out great in that particular medium. And I'm so glad people are digging it that way. That makes me happy. It's great.
Yeah, and there was actually another question about audiobooks. Do any of the audiobook characters sound different than what you imagined them in your head?
All of them do.
All of them?
Yeah. What's in my head and what the audiobook narrators do, completely different. And that's fine. Because honestly, when you read a book to yourself, the voices that you conjure up in your head will be different from mine, right? That goes with the territory as far as I'm concerned. So I do not care that the audiobook narrator sounds completely different from what is in my head. That's to be expected. So, and I appreciate the skill it takes to bring all of those characters to life. And I often find myself very amused by the audiobook narrator's performance because I'm surprised by it. So it's unexpected and delightful. I love it.
Yeah, all the gods from different pantheons and also the dogs there is a lot of possibility for different kinds of narration.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and actually there was another question. In Iron Druid Chronicles, there are multiple hard words, phrases, for example, or the Irish names, words, Polish names, cities, etc. So did you ever have any problems or funny situations related to mispronunciation of these words?
Well, okay, so Polish is a difficult language sometimes for English readers to appreciate. And I believe it might have been book 7, where Granuaile is running across Poland. And I was looking at a map of Poland and trying to figure out where she was running. And I had opportunities to pick easy to pronounce cities, but I picked one with a whole bunch of consonants in it just to mess with my audiobook narrator. And so I picked Bydgoszcz. And did I say that okay? Yeah.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. So I picked that particular city just to mess with him. And he did a fine job. But I'm doing it again in Candle and Crow, which is my 3rd Ink and Sigil novel that's coming out in October. I've got some Polish stuff going on in there too. So I picked a really difficult name for him to pronounce. And then I can't pronounce it, but it's a school with a whole bunch of SZCZ, stuff going on in it. And I just did it just to try to trip him up. So I have fun in doing that, and he knows that I'm doing it to him also, but he appreciates the challenge. So yeah, in terms of mispronunciation, since my audiobook narrator is in Michigan and he hasn't been out west, he wasn't familiar with some of the Spanish terms that got used in Arizona. So he mispronounced saguaro cactus, for example, in the first couple of books. He pronounced the G as a hard G. He said saguaro instead of saguaro. So little things like that happened in the first few books. But after that, they consulted me ahead of time and said, how are these pronounced? And I would provide them pronunciations, and then they were all correct after that.
Okay. And I think that this is also why audiobooks can be really amazing. Like, for example, the first time I read your books, I listened to them in Polish audio. And okay, for me, Polish names are, of course, easy. But for example, with everything Irish and all the names of gods and places, Fragarach and Gronia Whale and stuff, I would have never been able to pronounce it if the audiobook narrator didn't say it first. So it's really cool because, for example, my partner read your books in paper. He also is a huge fan of your books. But he doesn't know how to say these words out loud. So when I was trying to talk to him, we really had a problem.
Yeah.
For example, Gronia Whale on paper, that's something completely different.
Yes. Yeah, I know that the Irish names are very difficult for English speakers too. They have difficulty with Shiahan, and they wouldn't know how to pronounce that. It's because the Irish language has certain sounds that are pronounced or are spelled with Y's, for example, or W's or V's, but instead of using those letters, they do blends like DH and MH and stuff like that. So it looks very confusing to an English speaker, and you wouldn't know how to pronounce it unless you're really familiar with it. So audio is great for that.
Audio makes it life easier, definitely. Okay, if you lived in the Iron Druid Chronicles universe, which race would you like to be and why? So from all the races that you have, who would you like to be?
Do you mean like creatures? Is that
creatures? Yeah, creatures like fantastical races. Yeah.
Oh, okay. God, that's a good question. I suppose well, I would love to be a druid, honestly. I mean, that's really the thing that appealed to me, having that deep connection with nature and you know, I love the training period and all that kind of stuff. I would love to study all the languages and you know, have that deep knowledge and connection to nature and be able to draw strength from the earth and you know, connect with the world's animals. That would be lovely.
So you're a nature person.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. And there was another question. Which pantheon would you belong to?
Oh, gosh. I don't know about that.
Polish people play hard with their questions. What can I say?
Yeah. I mean, I would suppose I would go with the Irish one just because it's sort of, you know, closest to my own background. So, yeah, I think I'd go with that.
You would stay within your heritage.
Yeah. I don't think I'm as comfortable enough with everybody else's to really know where I would fit in. So, yeah, I'd stick with Irish.
Okay. If you could stop aging like Atticus, what age would you choose?
Probably late 20s. Late 20s, early 30s. Yeah, something like that.
Why?
Well, I kind of like being a little bit older. And I like the very long beard and all that kind of thing. So I would probably stick with that. I don't think I would want to go too young.
Because Atticus was 21, I think, something like that, like visibly, right? Around very early 20s.
Yeah, and he found that advantageous because people would underestimate him. And you know, it was part of his disguise. Nobody would expect what he really is or who he really is because he looks like a very young guy who knows nothing. And that was what he wanted. So, but on the other hand, you know, when Owen in book 7 comes back and they have to age him backward and he picks early 40s, you know, not everybody wants to be very young, you know, but maybe, you know, I want to be a full grown person who has a certain amount of respect because of what they appear to be. So that's what he was going for.
Yeah, for me, it was also very funny because I'm 36. So early 30s, you know, early 40s is like very close to my age. I don't feel like I'm old.
Right.
You know, so for me, yeah, I think that actually Owen was my favorite character when he appeared. Do you have a favorite character?
He was my favorite, yeah, because I loved the fact that he was able to comment on a lot of aspects of our society that we don't often think about, but would seem incredibly ridiculous to somebody who, you know, has come forward in time. So I loved using him as a way to comment on, you know, our society because he had a lot of thoughts.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And who was the hardest to write?
The bad guys.
Bad guys. Okay.
Yeah, to get yourself in that headspace where you just want to do evil stuff and figure out what their motivations were for that. That's always been a little bit more difficult for me. So yeah, I that always has been the toughest part for me is just, you know, figuring out why does a bad person want to do the things that they do and justify it as not being bad at all. So yeah, that Angus Og was.
Thank God he ended up where he ended
Right.
up.
Yeah, a god of love who had been very, very twisted from, you know, his you know, what he was supposed to be. So
But because Iron Drake Chronicles are mostly placed in modern times, like it's 2010 plus, right?
yeah.
They start, I think it starts at 2010.
Yes.
So you have a lot of creatures, a lot of people who have lived for thousands of years. And I think even Atticus, at some points in the books, is thinking about what does it mean to live for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and how it can change and influence people. So there was one question actually. Would you like to live thousands of years like Atticus?
I don't know if I'd want to do thousands, but maybe an extra 100 would be nice. I don't know. I just because I would, there's more that I would like to learn. There's more things I would like to see. And I think a lot of us, you know, in the short time that we're given, we don't get to see everything that we would like. There's a big world out there and we would like to visit it all and you know, meet as many people as possible. And we don't get the opportunity sometimes, you know, because well, there's just not, you know, travel is not cheap. And you simply,
Especially now.
yeah, you just don't have the time or the resources to see everything you would like to see. So for me, that would be something that I would enjoy. But I think the pain of seeing other people in your life, you know, pass away would be very traumatic after a while. And I'm not sure that I would like to continue to experience that. So
Yeah.
maybe a little bit longer, but not thousands for me personally.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. But I think that one of the most wonderful things that you did in your books was that Oberon was able to have a longer lifespan than a normal dog. And I think that every dog owner was reading that and it was like, oh, if I could have one thing, I would like to have that.
Yeah.
And be
Yeah.
able to, be able to make them live longer as long as us, right? That was really wonderful. Okay, but there was also a lot of questions connected to deities, not only Slavic deities, but in general. So okay, this you actually answered, so we can move on. But how did you decide how to portray gods and goddesses? What quirks and personalities to give them? For example, why is Perun a drunk?
Yeah. So with a lot of the deities hanging around as they did, a lot of them are having to process or deal with modern life and how much respect or worship they're given now. And as a lot of you are probably aware, many people choose to self-medicate with alcohol because they're not really enjoying what's happening. And Perun is a figure who his pantheon is sort of dying out, and he doesn't have as much worship as he used to do. He is no longer as powerful as he used to be, and he doesn't really have prospects for coming back, you know, and regaining the strength and love and worship that he used to have when he was younger. So the drunken part might be part of his own self-medication thing, and that's where he personally happens to be at this point of the journey. Thor is another character who is supposed to be a good guy in original Norse mythology, but he's an avatar for bad weather. He has a temper, you know, and he also unique among all Norse, or I'm sorry, unique among thunder gods. He knew when he was going to die. He had that prophecy about Ragnarok, right? So I figured if you're an unstable kind of person to begin with, just because your nature is thunderous and quick to anger and all of that kind of stuff, and you realize that there would actually be no consequences for your behavior until you met a really big snake, then, you know, you would over time start to become a jerk, because why not? You know, he had no, you know, there was no consequences for his bad behavior, then why can't he just do whatever he wants to people? So that was where I was coming from on that, and where that some of those portrayals were, I tried to remain true to who they originally were, but then also show that these people can grow, or maybe not grow, maybe decline, you know, the way anybody else would over time. So hopefully that.
And has anyone? Yeah, that's actually very interesting. And has anyone ever been offended by the fact you included certain religious figures that still, I mean, are worshipped, right, in your books? For example, Jesus, Maria, etc.
This is kind of a funny question, because I was wondering if that would happen too, and it hasn't. And I have figured out over time that the reason I don't get any blowback over the inclusion of Jesus and Maria and so on is that the people who would be offended by that don't read my books.
Okay.
You know, the kind of people who would be offended by that portrayal really probably don't read much besides the Bible, and maybe they don't even read that. So that's my guess anyway. I obviously can't speak for certain, but of course, when it came to Jesus and Maria, I tried to be as respectful as possible, and you know, portray them as, you know, they probably would be, and not the way a lot of modern churches portray them to be. So there you go.
And all the Hindu pantheon, right? They're also are worshipped nowadays. So yeah, so there were more of them, right? Yeah. Okay. What's your dream animal companion? Fantastical beasts included.
Ooh, I would love an otter. I don't know why. I'm into otters, man, and that's why I wanted.
Otter.
Yeah.
From all the animals, you would pick an otter.
I love otters. I just they make me happy. I you know, or gosh, yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, maybe a bird, maybe an owl or something like that would be cool too. But I don't know. I think otters are just the best. They make me so happy. I can't even say.
Others hold hands when they sleep and they float on the waters. Why not? Yeah. But it would be a talking otter.
Yeah, yeah. This is actually something that came along from. There's an American author that I don't know if folks in Poland have heard of him or not. His name is Alan Dean Foster, and he wrote a fantasy series called Spellsinger, and there was a talking otter in that, and I was very influenced by that, and I've always loved the idea of a talking otter. So yeah, that would be my thing for sure. Of course, talking to dogs would be wonderful. I mean, in general, you know, if I was a druid, I would be going around talking to everything I could.
Okay. Well, I understand it, because I mean, my dream companion would be a dog, but yeah, I would pick something along the lines of otter too, if I had to choose something different. But you said at the very beginning that part of the Iron Druid Chronicles dogs were your dogs, right? That you transferred them. So there was another question: that is there any character in any of your books that has a part of Kevin in it?
Well, I guess they all have a tiny bit of me, but in terms of like being based on real people, the only character that was based on somebody real was the Widow McDonough. She was based on my grandmother, but other than that, everybody is completely fictional. And yeah, there's not a ton of me in anybody in particular, but maybe more in Atticus in terms of just, you know, the desire to be in harmony with nature.
Okay. And why did you decide to give your witches Polish heritage?
Again, this was partially because of my friend from Warsaw. I wanted to to make her happy. And then it's also part of me realizing that I was looking for ways to distinguish my stories from some others. And I realized that there weren't a lot of Polish characters out there. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. Why not? So I like, if I can make them from anywhere, why not Poland? It doesn't matter, you know? So, and then of course, once I did that though, I discovered how incredibly fun Poland was. So yeah, it was a great decision all the way around. I've had a wonderful time whenever on my visits there. And I do indeed hope to get back sometime.
And it actually makes a lot of sense because before Christianity in the Slavic culture in Poland, we had a lot of like a tradition of witches and healers and all of this kind of stuff. So in the end, it actually played out really nicely that they are Polish. But there is another question: will you ever visit Pyrkon again? The last time you came, I didn't know yet who you were. Cries in regret.
Yeah. I would be delighted to come. The reason I was able to come before was because of my publisher, Rebus. And if I got invited again, I would love to come. But of course, as you all know, yeah, travel is incredibly expensive. So unless I had help to get there, I probably couldn't make it just on my own.
So I'm very lucky to be able to talk to you and to have the book with the autograph.
Yeah.
So yeah. Okay. Next one is, who, living dead or fictional, would you invite to a perfect dinner in your house?
Gosh, those questions always kind of trip me up because there's so many possibilities, right? That my mind goes blank. But I would probably right now, I would love to talk to a blues singer named Marcus King. So that's who I'm currently kind of fascinated with. And so I would love to talk to that guy and, just hang out with him a little bit. So he's only got 3 albums out. He's not like a legend or anything like that, but he's a little bit different from what I'm used to hearing, and I'm enjoying his work. So I would love to have him over. So yeah, so that's somebody living. I'm not sure about, dead or fictional or anything like that. I would have to think about it for a long time. You caught me by surprise.
And what about Iron Druid? Is there anyone from this universe that you would like to have a dinner with? Or is it better to just, avoid, look at from the distance?
I would love to hang out with the Yeti.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The Yeti, I think, would be a really fascinating dinner conversation because they have such a completely different experience of the world than I do. So yeah, and then of course I would love to watch them play hockey. So
okay, now there is a different question about a different book you also wrote in the Star Wars universe. So what's the creative process while working on such a big franchise? We're talking about to the Jedi. How much creative control did you have versus how much did you have to follow guidelines?
They basically said you can write a Luke Skywalker novel in between episode 4 and 5, right? And I agreed to do it because I was able to answer the question that I had always wondered as a kid. Because between episode 4 and 5, Luke grows quite a bit in the Force, and there's no explanation of how, because he hadn't met Yoda yet, and so on and so forth. So they told me I could not use hologram Ben Kenobi. He can't have conversations with Ben. So I couldn't use that, but I had to kind of provide that bridge information of how did he become better acquainted with using the Force between episode 4 and 5. So that was kind of the attraction to doing it for me. And that was the basic guidelines they gave me. Don't use Ben and don't use other Jedi. You have to make him grow in the Force without those things. So those were my limitations, and I went, for it based on that. So that was basically the situation. There's a lot more focus on the outline in that kind of thing. They want to approve your outline before you start drafting everything. So I don't follow that sort of procedure when doing my own work. So that's a different part of the process, or a different way to get things done, basically. But yeah, it's just a slightly different process, and a lot more people commenting on your manuscript than you're used to. But yeah, that they gave me almost full control, except for just a couple of constraints.
Okay. Favorite books? Any recommendations?
Yeah. I like to recommend to people the 10,000 Doors. The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex Harrow. I love that book. Completely beautiful, and there's a very good dog in it named Bad Dog, and then, there is I really enjoyed The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart. And The Saint of Bright Doors by Vajra Chandrasekhara. I'm not sure if you guys have heard about this very much in Poland.
I've had these published. We've had these published in Poland. Yeah.
It's getting a huge amount of conversation and buzz, and is nominated for awards, and I think it might win. You know, I mean, it's really, really well done. So I would recommend that.
Okay. How does your day look like as a writer?
It's different every day. So sometimes I'm writing early in the morning, sometimes I'm writing late at night, and then I have social media things I need to do. And yeah, the news, sometimes there's a newsletter to write, or a short story to do, or administrative stuff. And I have a thing where I give away signed bookmarks to folks, or signed book plates, and sometimes I'm doing that. But yeah, the writing part, I'm usually trying to get 1,000 words a day, and then if I get more, that's wonderful. So, and then
Okay.
sometimes I don't write at all, but I edit. Like yesterday, I just finished my edits for Candle and Crow. So, there you go.
Okay. And for everyone who doesn't know, this is a series which is a spin-off in the Iron Druid Chronicles universe. I went blank for a second here. So yeah, unfortunately, it hasn't been published in Poland yet, but maybe in the future. And what's the hardest part of being a writer?
Probably just, the uncertainty whether, you're going to sell enough copies to pay the electric bill, that kind of thing. It's just, there's no guarantee that what you write will find the audience. And so that's probably the hardest part about it, is that there's not actual security in what you're doing. You're not guaranteed any sort of success whatsoever. But, everything else about it is wonderful, because you're your own boss, and you can set your own hours and so on. It's great.
So do you think that publishing market is changing faster nowadays than it used to be?
Yeah. I mean, I just see things that are different in terms of the trends right now, but also the support that you get from publishers is really different. The sort of the destruction of social media has really affected marketing, and the publishers are like, well, you just market now. And we're like, we don't know how to do it, and you're not doing very much either. So it's difficult to know how to proceed, because Twitter is basically gone. It's not effective anymore, and it was only marginally effective before. So yeah, now you have different areas that you could try to get the word out, but it's really difficult to just get the word out to folks, because the social media platforms have their algorithms, and if you are trying to advertise anything, then they make sure you can't reach anybody without paying them.
Yeah,
you don't have an unlimited budget for that. So yeah, it's tough.
Okay, I see. All right. Have you ever thought about writing outside of science fiction and fantasy?
Oh yeah, a little bit. Mysteries and things like that. I've written, the Oberon's meaty mysteries that are basically cozy mysteries that feature a dog as your investigator. So that's kind of what I would like to do. In fact, I've got this. My latest one is called Canines and Cocktails, and you have Oberon and Starbuck there, and then there's also another couple of dogs as well. And this just came out
recently published, right?
Yeah, it came out in February. And so this is featuring Atticus, Oberon, and Starbuck. And it basically, this is the happy ever after for Atticus, if you guys want to check it out. So it's fantastic. And then, of course, you get a couple of other stories of dogs and drinks from Chuck Wendig and Delilah S. Dawson. So it's a great little publication.
So the story is based after the whole series of Android Chronicles.
Yeah, it takes place between Ink and Sigil Book 2, Paper and Blood, and then the book that's coming out in October, Candle and Crow. So it's about a year or a year and a half after Scourged. After the last book of the Iron Druid Chronicles, this takes place about a year and a half afterward. And yeah, it represents the happy ending for. Oh, sorry about that. Move my computer there. It represents the happy ending for Atticus that a lot of people had been waiting for.
Oh boy, so now I have to buy it. I saw it because I perused your website and I follow you also on your social media. So I saw it before, but I saw that it's not only your stories, but also some other people. So I was like, maybe I will buy it, maybe not. But now I have to. Okay, so after our conversation, I'm just gonna go and buy it.
Yeah, and the audio is done by Luke Daniels. It's fantastic. So I think you guys would like it.
Okay. And do you have any advice for future writers?
Sure. Get it done. get your book finished because you can't edit it or do anything else. And honestly, writing is the only thing that you have control over, right? You can't control anything else. So, but you could control your story and getting your story finished and tell the story that you want to tell. If you try to chase a trend, that trend will be gone by the time you're finished with your book. So, write the weird little thing that you have in your heart, because that's kind of what I did. I made sure that it was urban fantasy, but I was wanting to write Irish mythology. And so I wrote my weird little thing with a dog. And when it was done, I thought nobody is going to want to read this. This is silly. And then I was wrong. So people did want to read it. So that's the thing. Like I wasn't writing for the market necessarily, except to try to maybe do something people hadn't seen before. But I was writing this weird thing that had no guarantee of selling. And then it wound up being successful. So yeah, write the thing that you want to write. Something that will make you happy. And then hopefully, that joy that you have in telling that story will come across and people will take joy in reading it.
Okay, thank you so much. And okay, the last question for today. What are you working on right now?
I'm working on a new book, a completely new series that hasn't sold yet. So I don't know if you will get to read it or not. So, but it is in progress, and it is, I guess, a contemporary fantasy. And I'm hopeful that when I'm finished with it, I will be able to tell you more, that it'll be coming out soon. So yeah, that's kind of currently what I'm working on, and I'm having a blast. I'm about a third of the way through it at the moment. So,
but is it in any way connected to your previous works or no?
No, completely new thing.
Ooh. Yeah. Ooh, okay. So
yeah.
I'm sure we will all be looking for updates.
Can I give you one more?
Yeah, of course.
I have something like, if you guys like science fiction, I've got one out already called A Question of Navigation, and that's a lot of fun. And then at the end of June, this is coming out. It's called The Hermit Next Door. And yeah, this will be out in June from Subterranean Press. And basically, these people move into a new house, and the neighbor next door is not from around here. So yeah. It's pretty fun science fiction. So I hope you guys will dig it.
Subterranean Press. So is it going to be some special edition with some artwork or something? Yeah,
they produce signed limited editions, and they're numbered, right? So I think it's $40 US, and it comes signed by me, and then it also is numbered. So they only are making 1,000 or whatever. And then of course it'll be available in ebook, and it'll also be available in audio as well.
Okay, wonderful. All right, so I think that this is all for today. We've been talking for more than an hour, so thank you so much for answering all of our questions. It was really, really, really nice to talk to you. I'm really honored that you agreed to talk to me. As I said, once again, you're one of my favorite authors, and I haven't read everything from you yet, but I will.
That's okay.
It's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time, but I will for sure. Well, once again, thank you so much for coming, and have a good day. And everyone who's watching today, please go and follow Kevin on all of his social media. If you haven't read the books yet, then just read them because they're insanely good. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.